It's amazing how many students have come through. I must say it's been even when we were installing, I mean, it was like, it was countless classes that Brenna and I were kind of walking through and talking about the show as we were installing. So
I was a little late hooking up, right? I was about 2 minutes.
you're good.
Brenda, if Jade hadn't called me, it would have been later. I didn't realize how fast the clock was winding. We're in town, but yeah. But William Burroughs said never arrive early for an important appointment. He said that is really rude. In
So
other
should we
words, your host may not be ready.
should
That,
we
I
should
think that would
we
apply to cocktail parties.
should we jump in? I mean, do we as whenever you're ready to start and whenever you're ready to actually be recording. I don't know if we are yet, but and of course, just for the audience, we're in a position where if you have questions, I'm sure David will be delighted to address them. Maybe I can make just the little initial introduction, which is to say that I'm the director of the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery. I could not be more grateful to Kyle and Brenna and everyone there at Santa Fe College for being so enthusiastic and amazing in our being able to sort of travel this exhibition up there to you. And I'm so glad that you've had a chance to live with it now for the last more than a month. And so we're really lucky, I think, today. One, I'm in Fort Myers and obviously zooming in. David is up in Vermont, but we're really lucky to have David Bradshaw with us today. And so he's going to kind of give a lecture about his work, talk about the work. And I'm sure, again, if anyone has questions or you want to know more about specifics that happen to be in the exhibition. The exhibition happened initially here at the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery down in Fort Myers at Florida Southwestern State College. We, like you, are a small state college, primarily, associate's degrees. But we've been blessed that over many years we had a deep connection with the artist Robert Rauschenberg, who was a Captiva Island made Captiva Island his home, which is quite near to us. And this exhibition, I've known about David's work for many decades. Actually, I was probably 18 or 19 when I first discovered his work. I was working at the Contemporary Art Museum in Tampa, and they owned some work by David. And then soon thereafter, or a few years thereafter, David and William Burroughs were then invited to make some projects at the University of South Florida's Graphic Studio. And he may talk about that because also the title for the exhibition, William S. Burroughs and David Bradshaw, comes up, and propagation really also comes from and is connected to a project that he did at Graphic Studio. But I was lucky enough to be beginning to sort of delve more deeply into William Burroughs. We did a show here with William Burroughs and Laurie Anderson. And in doing that, we included some work that was collaborative with David. So I reached out to David, tracked him down up in Vermont, and was just thrilled with the exchanges and the process, and we became dear friends. And I, feel so grateful for all of that. But then we have now since done two exhibitions, and what you're experiencing is a kind of version of that where both of those exhibitions got combined, and we're hoping to continue to sort of circulate them. But with that, this is David Bradshaw also. So please, David, tell us more about maybe how you got to know William Burroughs. Maybe that's a place to start. Or how
Well,
you became an artist.
yeah, that place of start would have been New York, 1967, and uh, the introduction was made by fellow painter David Prentice, and he and Burroughs had uh, been in a loft building on Center Center Street, right above Canal Street. Uh, with a big gold sign on the edifice, the front of the building that said Atomic Machinery Exchange, and that's back when what came to be called Soho was still an industrial loft area of New York, bounded on the north from west to east by Houston Street and on the south by Canal Street, and spanning that band of Manhattan over to just past Center Street, which from there on it was Little Italy. And the police headquarters and the mobster headquarters were an exact same patch of territory in southeast Manhattan. So we can see where that went. But Burroughs and I guess we kind of connected. And in 1969, I was had started shifting from painting to using dynamite, and I blew up a log jam in the Winooski River in Vermont, close to Goddard College, and that became my first dynamite artwork. And at that, and in somewhere in there, one night at my loft on Spring Street in 2 blocks below Houston and a block west of Broadway. That's right in Soho. I was with Deborah Hay and my dog Sumi, and Burroughs calls, "David, I want to see those films of dynamite." So Burroughs comes over and I put up the 16 millimeter projector. Rauschenberg had loaned me his Aeroflex camera that he bought to go on a world tour with Merce Cunningham, and figuring he was going to document the choreography and dance performances as they traveled around the world. Deborah Hay was in that, Paxton, Steve Paxton, and so forth. And Rauschenberg never shot a foot of film out of that camera, so he'd never used it. So I took it. And so I did some dynamite films and others with it. And the same camera was later on, Gordon Mata found out about that and said, well, maybe they'd let me use it. So, and Gordon Mata shot some film with it, a great artist and sculptor friend of mine. So Burroughs comes over and looks at the dynamite. I showed a film of, I think it was Steve Paxton bundling up a bunch of dynamite and lighting a fuse and throwing it into the Winooski River. And then you see a splash in the water where the dynamite lands, and then the water smooths over like nothing happened. And in a short period later, there's this huge eruption, and the water blows up in the air and then settles back down. And eventually, the water smooths over as though nothing had happened. And then at the end of that film, that black and white 16 millimeter, I reversed the projector and ran the film backwards to where at the end, Steve Paxton is catching this bundle of dynamite, comes out of the water, arcs through the air, and he catches it in his hand. And so Burroughs saw, I think, much more in that than I did, because it really lit him up. At any rate, he loved that film. So we kind of hit it off. But in 1980, I won the first world revolver championship. A very tough match. And Smith & Wesson, the famous firearms manufacturer in Springfield, Massachusetts, presented me one of their then brand new stainless steel 44 Magnum revolvers. So I had it with me down in Austin, Texas, and Burroughs was at the University of Texas doing a gig there. And so I intercepted William, and I asked him if he'd like to shoot this revolver that had been presented to me at on the podium of the championship, and he said, by all means. So the next, I said, how about, I said, tomorrow's pretty good. And William's personal secretary says, uh, "We have William. You have 3 interviews tomorrow," and Burroughs says, "Hang the interviews. David and I are making art." So we went to an indoor shooting range in Austin, Texas, and I picked out some uh, camouflage uh, geometric man silhouette forms, and we hung them up on the range, and we shot 5 of these. And I shot one and signed it to William, and William shot one and signed it to me, and we shot the other 3, and that was on William's birthday, February 5th, 1981. That was the first Bradshaw Burroughs collaboration. And from then on, it became this sporadic recurrence. And that led to the depredation of your walls in the gallery most recently. So that's kind of like the beginning of our relationship that lasted up until 2 months before he joined the Feathered Choir and I helped bury him.
Yeah. Well, can you, given of course controversy to do with Burroughs and guns, can you talk about both your interest in guns as an art making tool and also with dynamite, and also, you know, how you perceived or conversations you had with Burroughs about his relationship to guns and his then desire to make art. I mean, one of the things that you and I have discussed a number of times is sort of both the history of sort of art and destruction and things like Dias in London and in New York, the destruction in art kind of movement in the early 60s, and lots of the nouveau realists and, like, you know, using fire or using guns, Nicky de Saint Phalle. How much, I know that Burroughs was friends with Gustav Metzger, who wrote the manifesto on auto-destructive art and auto-creative art in the late 1950s. What can you tell us about, you know, both your relationship to guns, those kinds of devices, explosives, and then your perception of Burroughs' interests in those things?
Well, I grew up as a kid in Washington, D.C., and the 1950s was an era of a lot of heavy street gang activity. It was very different than anything that came after it. And that I think that was nationwide, certainly New York, D.C. I would imagine all urban areas experienced it. And the I never had that kind of an inclination at all. And but I got with a couple of other kids as uh, primarily a black kid whose name I don't remember, and this other and this and another white kid, and we made some zip guns. And a zip gun is a homemade firearm that doesn't rely on any store-bought ammunition or firearm component to be a firearm. So it's a complete kind of concoction, and dangerous. Can be dangerous on both ends. And I discovered that that little pistol was a way to say no if you're coming back from the grocery store or a store, and 4 or 5 guys say they're going to take their, give it up. You're going to take your money or take your candy or take your groceries from you. Pull that pistol out and said, "Well, I'm going home," and the first person who comes at me gets it. And then they, finding out that the way is cleared for you, it's like, okay, so this firearm, unable to articulate it as just about barely a teenager, but basically what it represented was a residual means of saying no to superior force. And I learned something else about street gangs. If you're not in a street gang, you got a lot more freedom of movement. If you're in a street gang, you get out of your territory and you get identified, then you're instantly a target. So then that kind of like resigns you to living in a, moving, being in a pack. But another feature of street gangs that I'd learned as a kid in DC was that most of the kids seemed to have no home life. They didn't really have a parental, they didn't have a nest there. And so the gang became their family. And that's a huge distinction that's, I'm sure the great amount of society is yet to respect. But it certainly is factual when your feet are on the ground. And of course, I had great parents. And being in DC, I was taken to, my sister and I taken to galleries. You've got all the museums, the great Smithsonian, National Gallery, and you've got the two greatest, finest pieces of memorial architecture in the United States, which is first the Lincoln Memorial and second the Washington Monument. There isn't anything anywhere in the U.S. Equal to those two. So my mother was a pianist who made love to her 1892 Steinway about 6 hours a day, a very fine pianist. And, and she would play her Steinway, get with her best friend, Maggie Tolson, who was a super pianist, and they would play their Steinways back to back for hours at times. So I grew up surrounded by, falling into art wasn't a particularly alien way to go, and being able to just do stuff on your own. So back into the 60s, and I in 68, 69, I started, I was painting on the wall on canvases, and I just decided, why the hell am I making stretchers? And I think that the canvas is a piece of hide. So they've got to realize the 60s, the civil rights movement generated the most electrifying social force in my lifetime. But the civil rights movement, women's liberation, the anti-war movement, of course, came up out of that.
You became deeply involved in those things, and it happened to also be around the time you were in Hartford in terms of going to art school.
Yeah, I was in art school, and I got there was a recruitment looking for people to sign up for freedom rides into the Deep South, and I signed up. I went and got hooked up with a movement. Didn't actually make a freedom ride because the buses got canceled, because in Anniston, Alabama, a Greyhound bus had been burned to a crisp, people viciously beaten, people were getting killed. Way more people got killed than anybody will ever know, because a lot of that reportage just wasn't happening. But so I was in the civil rights movement. Yeah, included rent strikes and sit-ins, voter registration, Mississippi, Danville, Virginia, which was the last capital of the Confederacy in 1963. It still thought it was. So yeah, met Malcolm X a number of times, yeah. So I had that kind of energy, and when I got into the art world, the dance, painting, sculpture, music, all exploding in the 60s. The most beautiful creative energy was erupting. Well, these were social energies. The World War II wasn't that far far behind us, and people who wanted to continue the mentality that led to World War II were very resistant to anything innovative. And so we had the McCarthy era of the 50s, but I was a little kid then. But we were disabusing ourselves of the notion that somebody else should do your thinking for you. And so you had the social movements and the art movements, and I just said dance, painting, sculpture, music. Those to me were all the same energy. They just kind of found themselves in other mediums.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's important today
that whole circle of
that you cannot comprehend what was happening in the 60s without respecting that unifying force, energy. And the articulation comes through the medium. The articulation does not come through rhetoric. It doesn't come through ideology. Yeah. And you know, there's no such thing as reactionary art. I mean, you're either trying to discover or learn, or you're wasting your time, or and if you want somebody else to look at it, you're wasting theirs too. I mean,
it seems like Bob Rauschenberg too was very central to all of that, and that obviously you were in that circle, but the collaborations like Nine Evenings, his relationships with John Cage and Merce Cunningham, and the whole interdisciplinary nature of all of that, but also engaging with, you know, NASA and the Apollo missions and all those kinds of things. It must have been a pretty remarkable time to be engaged in it. How was your art being accepted, and when you first began to use both explosives and guns? One, I think you presented that idea in a way while you were in school, right? And maybe fly, and then but also you had difficulty in exhibiting that work at some point as well. Maybe you can talk about that too.
Oh yeah, it was like shock theater. I mean, we can't have this stuff here. Yeah. And I know one painting instructor in art school told me, David, you have to decide between civil rights and art. Wow. And I thought, I think it's time I head for New York. I mean, that didn't happen that decision didn't happen in the same day, but that was like, okay, I've burned down the possibilities here. Now I've got to get out and thrash in the world. And so I'd say the acceptance came from other artists. They're more than from the outside, which is always waiting to look for something to be accepted before they agree to accepting it. And to me, it's you got to use your nose. You got to I mean, like Malcolm X said, the most dangerous thing you can do is learn to think for yourself.
Wow.
But like Rauschenberg, of course, was of marriage. He came out of World War II. You know, Jasper Johns, on and on. And they then came up behind. I mean, yeah, the monumental force really in abstract expressionism really kind of was put up by Jackson Pollock, but there was, you know, you got to rebel against your elders. What you rebel is because you see something new that you need to make it. You need to make it, whether it's music or dance or painting. You can't tell what's in your head until you make it. I mean, and that's why this is the big contention between predetermination and spontaneity is that I'm Burroughs and I kind of hit it off. We like you agree with the spontaneous side of things. Okay, well, what would be the difference? Well, you couldn't go industrially and order any of my dynamite sculptures to be made. Can't be done. Uh, but you could, and I knew him. Uh, you you could order a cube to be made out of plywood or steel and have a welding shop or a fabricating shop make it. And then you can come afterwards. You could complain about why it isn't quite perfect. And my contention, and this would go directly to guys like Donald Judd, is okay. If you want it so perfect, what are you howling about when you have somebody else make it for you?
Mm-hmm.
If you want it to be exactly this way, it sounds to me like you're the only one possible to pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of being angry at your fabricator, maybe you should be angry at yourself for not getting your hands dirty enough. And so these arguments were going on in the art world, but Bob did a lot of things. I mean, the white paintings were like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, this is the next thing is stepping off the canvas altogether.
Yeah.
The issues going on where there were, a revolt against the materialism, the commodification of art.
And
The
and
maybe people hearing this understand, and if they don't, they probably have to look some stuff up
yeah.
because we don't quite have time to dig into all of that right now. But
Yeah.
I found like when I moved from my painting was getting to where like I was going uptown to uh, uh, Beaucourt Colors, and there was a guy named Sam Golden who was the chemist at Beaucourt Colors, and I would buy some experimental acrylic mediums from him. I wanted the clearest. I wanted a medium I could put on the canvas, and it would be invisible. All I wanted it to do was to support these super fine, atomized fine bronze powders that I bought in New York and mixed into the medium. And I would paint anywhere from 12 to 20 to up to 30 applications on a canvas of this medium, and I would mix each coat separately. And the medium's job was just to support this, not to have the visual thickness of acrylic, which is like it's clear acrylic's not a super attractive thing to feast your eyeballs on. And Sam Golden was coming up with this stuff that which I really liked. So I'd go up to the back. He'd meet me at the back door of the Beaucourt place uptown, midtown Manhattan. I'd or where somewhere on the slightly west side, and I'd buy gallons of this stuff from him out the back door. Sam Golden later went on to start his own art paint company, and
Bob, Bob Rauschenberg used it exclusively too, but it was Roy Lichtenstein who turned him on to Golden.
Okay.
And much like you, it's interesting, even with Golden paint, when Bob came back from South America and had met tribal folks in a very remote place on the Amazon, he brought back some of the mud that they coated their bodies with, that they would paint themselves with, and had Golden make paints using this mud that he brought back in a jar. So
yeah, which is great, which means he had, So this kind of, I mean, we were all searching. There was um, and and I started. So these paintings, Bob Rauschenberg loaned me two couple of 1,000-watt lamps, which I brought down from his place on 381 Lafayette Street down to my loft at 114 Spring Street, and I put them on the paintings, and I found that I was falling into the paintings. They had this kind of depth to them, which the more light you could pour into them, the deeper they went visually. And I thought, I don't know how. Okay, so I was leaning more towards in the direction of fulmination. Well, I went up to uh, Plainfield, Vermont, for a weekend or a few days and stayed with Barry Goldenson and his wife. Barry Goldenson was a brother of the dancer choreographer Deborah Hay, and he was a literature poetry professor at Goddard. At any rate, there was a log jam across the Winooski River, big river, and it was springtime. The snow is melting, and this log jam is going to cause some fields to start flooding out. And Barry wouldn't think of doing it himself, but he said, maybe we could dynamite, we could get some dynamite and blow that log jam. And the log jam is from all the deadfall of the winter, floating down streams and getting in the river and finally plugging up and creating a dam. So we went down to the hardware store and ordered a case of nitroglycerin dynamite and bought some blasting caps and some what's called safety cord. It's underwater fuse cord. And I dynamited that log jam, and that became my first work. And from that moment on, I said, yeah, okay, so I'm leaning in this direction, and this is where painting is actually, my paintings have kind of that fell off the stretchers, and now they've fallen off the wall, and they've fallen in the drink, and the drink's blowing up, and this is the direction it's going. And eventually I started using the dynamite on and making objects, commodities, you could say, out of it. But at the time in New York, there's a big argument about going on about all the conceptual battles were going on. Well, the dynamite kind of really addressed them without saying so in words. It was you can't show dynamite explosion in a gallery. Can't hang it on a wall. You can't sell it. You can't buy it. And it's experiential. If you're there, you have the experience, whether you want to or not. And if you're not there, you don't have the experience. So I thought this is pretty simple. And but it does produce the problems with art dealers. Mm-hmm. How do they handle dynamite? Well, they don't want to handle it. Yeah. So I don't know if I've answered the unasked question or the posed question, or I've just sort of.
It's interesting. I think, one of the things that I think about some of the artists of that period, Nouveau realists like César, and also, of course, like the obvious, because you were friendly with, often in the circle of like John Chamberlain, but his work was clearly about like compression. And I always think about the dynamite thing and also the creation of those works as being both remarkable in that they're instantaneous, and at the same time, it's about expansion. It's about a different kind of pressure. It's about, so I
exactly.
And I think about your relationship to Gordon Matta Clark, and also the idea that there's a lot you can say about cutting up houses or splitting buildings, but
yeah. Gordon Matta Clark and I got along great. He's died way too soon of pancreatic cancer. 76, I think. But yeah, so look at sculpture, and how do you make sculpture? Well, if it's stone, you're going to take a piece of stone and you're going to whittle away everything you don't want there. Okay, but now let's move over to the metals, which could be bronze, copper, aluminum, iron, steel. basically you're either basically using say steel in sculpture. Uh, Everything is about cutting or compression, and forming steel is fundamentally an act of compression. How do you make a flat sheet of steel? You take a you melt steel into a block, form it into a block, and you put it through rollers to squeeze it down till it comes out like a pie crust, or like pasta flour. It's got, but there's compression. There's mechanical manipulation of the material.
Mhm.
With dynamite, you take a flat sheet of steel, and a second later, you've made a flour.
Mhm.
And it's not about, it's not an act of mechanical manipulation. What you do with the high explosive cannot be done by any mechanical means, just cannot be done by mechanical means.
Mhm.
It's the explosion, just like making a universe or a star coming apart, is fundamentally an act of expansion.
Mhm.
And what happens is a solid or a liquid, you're forcing it to convert into gas in the space of tiny fractions of a second. And and so if uh, and so that's where I went with uh, using high explosives and steel,
Mhm.
and also some other materials, but primarily with steel.
Mhm.
So yeah, and Burroughs identified with it completely. Rauschenberg certainly. Richard Serra, we had our Richard Serra and I had our differences, but I think there's respect there. So, but I
Mhm.
mean, he was contentious with anybody.
Mhm. Mhm. So talk more about, your relationship with Burroughs lasted decades. I mean, it's truly remarkable that over that time, from the first, making art with David in Austin, Texas, there were visits to Lawrence, Kansas, where, he spent the last part of his life, and frankly, people would talk about, or he would talk about, that being his second career as an artist. It allowed him to really, I think the way that they talk about his, at least coming to painting, was after Brian Geison's passing. He felt he wouldn't be a competitor for Brian Geison, and or outsell him, or have Brian be upset by all of that. But really, in a way, you started making art with him prior. He actually starts making some of the plywood pieces that involve paint prior, but it's kind of, he picks up the brush, or sometimes the painting glove. Most of that happened after 1986. But can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the work? And you really, in the end, made the sort of last projects with Burroughs in 1997, which is when he passed.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Um, I think I'm the main instigator in William becoming a visual artist. I mean, really putting his foot down in that path. He did not get support uh, from the person very closest to him, uh, and uh, I think shooting that series Camouflage Man on his birthday in 1981 uh, lit the fire in his head. But the seeds were always there, because I think uh, certainly William, he was a wordsmith. He was a concept smith. I mean, he was a concept smith who made words the medium, just as his best friend in the universe, Allen Ginsberg, did, who uh, to me, you know, his singular super masterpiece in poetry is his poem Howl. Um, that uh, that I mean the beats also they were you know right in the realm of abstract expressionism in terms of writing. Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs. They also turned obscenity law on its head. Allen and William specifically with their writing opened up what could be expressed in literature. But in art, we were opening up what could be expressed visually. That's the language. If you, people, you can talk about it, but I mean, the idea with uh, is to is to excite someone's mind to find the world on their own, and so that's the
Did you
the
see?
job of an artist is really selfish in terms of execution. It's to is to try to satisfy yourself, and it's not easily done. I don't. If you like something you made right away, it may be really flawed. I think you can't even know your own work sometimes for quite a while. Um, Liking something of your own too quick is can come off just insufficient or shallow.
Did
But
you did
maybe I'm taking the question and I'm just digressing it too much.
no? Well, did you see and or did William see a relationship between, like, again, shooting and, again, that's something that's done from a distance without, actual mark making in the sense of with hand, or but also a relationship to, like, the cut ups, because I mean I think
Well,
again one of the
marksmanship,
things that
yeah,
he experimented with.
marksmanship is the marksmanship to me uh, is and is is to touch without touching.
Hmm.
I mean, if you're if is and to be specific about the target. It's a discipline. It's marksmanship could be said to be my music. I'm not talking orally. I'm talking performance wise, striking a note. But William also liked to be able to remove his hand from the product, and I think so. The combination of I think I think my shooting and the explosive work probably influenced quite a bit of Williams' visual expression. You had the pirate, well, kind of with him more pyrotechnic, but you had the eruption and because he didn't consider himself by any degree a marksman the way he thought of me, and he knew he had to. He didn't. He didn't. He didn't. He was. He couldn't possibly play the same tune with a firearm. Now this leads into another area where there have been explosives used in art. And Billy Kluver, one of the Rauschenberg collaborators in experiments in EAT, experiments in art and technology, was
Who would work for
fired.
Bell Labs too. Yeah, Bell Laboratories. Yeah.
Billy Kluver was in on the basic ground floor development of the laser beam. And he, of course, hung out and did a lot of stuff with Rauschenberg. But he was keen to show me a film of some guy who worked in the aerospace or industry in California who decided he was an artist or something, and he made these forms and he used some explosives to form metal into these forms, which is basically, you go to Detroit, they say, yeah, uh, we don't use explosives. We use a thing called a set of dies where you have two contours of a male and female of two dies, and you put a sheet of flat steel in there and you stamp them together, and what comes out is a fender or the roof of a car. Well, that's what this guy. So he made a completely predetermined form and called it artwork. And I just thought, and Kluver, I said, Billy, what is this about? Well, this guy like used some explosives, and I got looked at it a little closer, and it just yeah. I said, it it's it's uh, it's I you don't have to know exactly what you're doing, but but I here this guy works in the space industry or aerospace industry, and he's making something predetermined. He's making you don't have to leave the earth to realize that.
Mhm.
I mean, you're
How,
coming out with where's the surprise? Like the job of an artwork should be to liberate you to make the next one.
yeah.
I mean, if there's no information in the damn thing, what are you doing? Then okay, get a printing press.
How much of the collaborations would have been predetermined? It was you weren't living in the same town. You would come for extended visits to Lawrence, for example, in the 90s and in the
I'd make
80s.
targets over at Fred Aldrich's outside of town, which is where Burroughs went to shoot on once a week whenever he could. Fred Aldrich is a great guy, and he supported William's shooting habits. And when I showed up, well, I would either bring targets that I'd painted or painted them on the spot.
Hmm.
And in the case of those Tin Men series in 1997, in May and June 97, and William died August 2nd
Hmm.
of 97, the I borrowed some torches. I can't remember. Wayne Probst may have hooked me up with someone who had some cutting torches, and I
Who was
I
a dear he was a dear friend of Burroughs, and he's a Lawrence, Kansas-based artist, still living and working there now, and actually was instrumental in our putting together some of this show and accessing things that had been sort of long lost in his barn. But yeah.
and I cut out the so I cut out some Tin Men that the yeah, we hadn't got into the Tin Man series, which first started in the 70s, early 70s. And so these were in the show. And Brenna, you may have, I don't know, you've probably seen these things. And those series that were shown at the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery, or they're among those are in the last collaborations, which were both what paper and that sheet metal. So I cut out these forms, and there was one eyepiece cut out. I had asked Laurie Anderson, the musician, to if she would make a target for William and me, and she said yes, and she sent it down to Lawrence, Kansas, and I never heard about it. And I'm down there, and I'm going through a folio of William's work, and I'm looking at got the holding it open, and I say, "Damn, look at this! This is the piece," and it was I think it was Two Eyes, isn't it? Two Eyes,
It's too.
drawn by Laurie Anderson, and they were targets for William and me to shoot. And nobody told me about this, and William didn't mention it, which led me to think that these things had been received and stashed away, and he didn't even know about them. And I should have snatched them on the spot, but I didn't. well, I made an eyepiece out of metal in '97, and we shot it and signed it. And was that in the show? We
It
didn't.
was here, yeah, it
That
was
was here,
here,
but didn't go on the wall. Yeah.
and then of course the original drawings have been on deposit, or maybe they've been added to the collection of the Spencer Museum in Lawrence. So the Spencer has the drawings, but of course though they were inscribed both to you and to Burroughs. So
Yeah.
yeah, and the way that they were set up was that they were drawings of a left eye and a right eye, and they were supposed to be 6 feet apart, and to aim for the middle, basically, not to hit the targets anyway, but to hit in between the targets was Laurie's idea with that. But I wonder too how long we should go, and or if anyone might have a question or two that they'd like answered.
Yeah, I should shut up for a while and hear
No,
which way the water's flowing.
Brenna, yes. Oh, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Okay. What advice would you give to someone who has either like tactical skill or ability in art, but struggles to find their voice, or vice versa, if they have something to say and struggle to find their outlet?
That is the question. What can be done to get some motion going
Right. Like,
there?
what advice would you give someone who is in that position?
Yeah. So someone has, and re-steer me if I'm going off on the wrong rail. But if someone has a facile hand, has a really powerful innate ability
Mhm.
to express, say, with a pen or a pencil, um, or with music. That I think that huge talent can get somebody locked into where they're just obeying that unique articulation, and to not be able to escape that. It becomes like a fence. I'll give an illustration. So try to get to how the hell do you get out of that? Because I mean, do you follow your skill, or does your skill go to work for what your mind thinks must happen? And I'll illustrate this. The uh, who could have a more impeccable voice than Joan Baez? And I sometimes think she is trapped by her voice. I think that the and take her pal Bob Dylan, who's he has a tremendous voice, but he doesn't have any of the operatic quality that Joan Baez has. Mm-hmm. But he didn't let that stop him from throwing out just exploring the oral realm. And I think the same, if someone was like has a super facile hand with a pen or pencil, and they think that everything is in the service of that, then they're going to start making they're going to fall into a predictability, and that predictability is basically a corral or a confinement. And so their art is not going to be as going to have a harder time reaching a universal level. Does that answer or not? Or
No,
does
that
it?
makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Bob Rauschenberg used to also sometimes say success is a worn down pencil. I mean, I think part of it is, you hopefully you can kind of break through those things. You find inspiration. One of the wonderful things about David's initial visit here when we opened the exhibition was, he came into the room, we were installing, we were working on how to place and how to, put things up. And he sort of discovered in the vitrine an object that we talked about a little bit, I believe, but that he knew the backstory, which was this, this knife that is in the current exhibition there that had been gifted as to impress, but from Kurt Cobain to William Burroughs when they finally met. They'd already done a little record together at a distance by, Burroughs sending his voice and a bit of a reading and Cobain noodling on guitar over. But when David, saw the object, it became clear and obvious that he really wanted to, pursue making a series of drawings with this. So over the next couple of days, as we were planning that we were going to, be seeing the sites a bit and going to Captiva and revisiting Bob's house and those things, but he wanted some studio assistance. We were tearing in paper. We pulled that object out of the vitrine, and he went to work. And it's been something that not only did he make a great number of those works that are in the exhibition, those knife drawings that you see, and he's such an incredible draftsman, obviously too. But it's a series that has continued. So again, I think a lot of that too becomes a matter of working through these things when when it's about going to work, not necessarily feeling like everything has to be precious. I mean, I think for Rauschenberg, getting to the point where he's erasing a de Kooning drawing, for me, goes back to his having had his second show in Italy and was in Florence, and the art critic suggested that he throw all of his work away, that it was essentially worthless. And before he left, he dumped all of those contemplative objects, those works that he had shown in Florence, in the Arno River. So he came back with nothing, but also he would always joke that he didn't have a shipping problem either, And when he won the Venice Biennale in 1964 for Rauschenberg, he called back and to a studio, and the works that had won him the award were the screen printed works with JFK and with 63, 64. And he asked that all the screens be destroyed. So he couldn't come back and just continue, or he knew that there'd be a market for them. He knew that there would be, and he wanted just to continue to challenge himself, and push those boundaries, but also push himself to always be changing, always be open, always be,
Yeah. There we are back to spontaneity. And we were just talking about, having a facile ability and getting trapped by it. But Bob wasn't going to get trapped by it. A very facile hand was that of Jasper Johns, and he didn't. I mean, he was a great draftsman, as they say, but he used that to get outside of it. So you could take that to be a device to trap yourself, that having a perfectly operatic voice, and not get outside that. I mean, someone who got outside of that would be like, who certainly I would say would have a heraldic operatic voice, would be Aretha Franklin. She blew the walls off of that by pushing the boundaries of oral music, and was not trapped by her
But
voice.
I have another question, actually, David. The idea, and again, I think it clearly comes into play both when using dynamite and when using guns, and I suspect it was of considerable interest to Burroughs, given the cut ups and given, but also as it relates to music and thinking about Rauschenberg and his relationship to, say, John Cage and his use of and creation of aleatoric, and chance-based procedures for composing, or for how does chance sort of play a role? Because Burroughs always talked about, maybe you can speak to that too, his interest in control, essentially. How did the making of the art and the idea that you can never really control a bullet, and to devastating ends in Burroughs' case, obviously, but how did chance play into that, and what do you recall about Burroughs' interest in control, maybe?
Well, maybe the chance comes down to, can you control it?
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of boundaries can you put on it? With me, the dynamite or marksmanship is really, it really is about, I mean, the control. I want some, let's go to dynamite or get away from the bullets for a second. With a high explosive, it's just a medium. I mean, at first the explosions, that was the piece. So it was a total consumable. So, all the conceptual challenges that were erupting in the 60s, pretty much all of them, I think I dealt with between gunfire pieces, but most especially with high explosives. And that the arguments today may not, be even, would have to be looked up by many, but there was a very intense time and I just think that the spontaneity has to do with needing to see more than you visualize. So with a dynamite piece, I may have an idea, but I do have an idea when I'm going at it. Whether that if the idea could be articulated in words, then why not just use words? That'd be simpler. But it has to do with the nature of the language. Painting, sculpture, those are languages, and that what I want when the smoke clears is to be looking at more than I wanted. I mean, not to, and Bob would say it this way, you have to make it in order to see it. Or that would be probably a really rough paraphrase of what Rauschenberg would say. But I think the jumping the rails just a little bit. Jack Kerouac said, you got to write, you got to put it down. It's got to, you're starting to pollute it the moment you rewrite it. And his friend Burroughs, no, practically everything you write can be rewritten and be clearer and stronger. So they got along great. They were, but they had conceptual differences.
Truman Capote would say Kerouac was typing, not writing. Yeah. With his, doing the scroll for both On the Road and Dharma Bums. We've shown On the Road here, the actual 200-foot long, 100 and something foot long original manuscript. So with that, we've been on about an hour, so if there aren't any other questions, should we wrap up, Brenna? And or if there are questions, we're happy to answer too. And this has been really great. I'd like to thank everybody both for being here and the idea that we have recorded and might be able to post this so that others can see it. It's been really an honor and a thrill to be able to bring the show to Santa Fe College. And I've got to really thank David and of course, our friends at Santa Fe for, making this happen. So
Yeah, thank
with
you
that,
so much. And thank you for taking the time today to talk with us. This has been a really great experience for us, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And wonderful meeting you. And I trust we meet again in more 3D.
Oh, I hope so.
good.
All
Nice
right.
to see you all.
You
And
too.
if there's any follow-up, Brenna, maybe, not lose each other's numbers. So
Sounds good.
thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Brenna.
And thank
Bye-bye,
you,
everybody.